December 5, 2024, Florence, Colorado. A 65-year-old diesel mechanic named Troy Lake walks into a federal prison camp. His crime? Removing emissions equipment from trucks that couldn't pass inspection without the work he did. School buses, ambulances, fire trucks, the vehicles that keep small towns running in Wyoming winters. The EPA raided his shop. The Department of Justice charged him with conspiracy to violate the Clean Air Act. A federal judge sentenced him to 12 months in one day and fined him $52,000 for fixing trucks. Troy Lake spent his 65th birthday in prison. He spent his 40th wedding anniversary in prison. His wife Holly fought for his freedom while he sat in a cell in Colorado, helpless. Here's the thing. 2 months after Lake was pardoned, the same Department of Justice that put him there announced it was wrong to prosecute people like him in the first place. And right now, half the diesel community thinks that means deletes are legal. They are not. That is the part nobody is telling you. The raid. Troy Lake ran a shop called Elite Diesel Service outside Cheyenne, Wyoming. He had been working on diesel engines his entire adult life. His customers were ranchers, truckers, owner-operators, and municipal fleets. The kind of people who need their trucks running in minus 30-degree weather and cannot afford to wait 6 weeks for a dealer appointment. In 2018, EPA agents showed up at his shop, not with a citation, not with a warning letter, with a raid. They accused Lake of performing deletes, removing or bypassing DPF filters, EGR valves, SCR catalysts, and DEF systems on diesel trucks. For anyone who does not live in the diesel world, here is what those systems do. The DPF, diesel particulate filter, traps soot. The EGR, exhaust recirculation, routes exhaust back into the intake to reduce nitrogen oxide emissions. The SCR, selective catalytic reduction, sprays diesel exhaust fluid into the exhaust stream to break down pollutants, and the DEF system is the tank and injection hardware that feeds it. Every one of these systems was mandated by the EPA starting in 2007. Every one of them adds cost, complexity, and failure points to a diesel engine. And every diesel truck owner in America has a story about a DPF that clogged at 70,000 miles, an EGR valve that carbon fouled and killed fuel economy, or a DEF system that threw a truck into limp mode on the highway because a sensor failed. Troy Lake's customers came to him because the emission systems on their trucks were failing, the repairs cost thousands, and the trucks couldn't work. He removed the failing equipment, tuned the engines to run without it, and sent them back to work. The EPA called that a federal crime. The prosecution. The federal government charged Troy Lake with conspiracy to violate the Clean Air Act. Not assault, not fraud, not theft. Conspiracy to tamper with emissions equipment. Lake pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 12 months and 1 day in federal prison, fined $52,000. He reported to FCI Florence, a minimum security prison camp in Colorado, on December 5, 2024. Think about that timeline. 2018, the raid, 6 years of legal proceedings, and then prison for a man whose entire career was keeping diesel engines alive in one of the harshest climates in the country. Lake was not running a chop shop. He was not building competition sled pull trucks. He was servicing school buses and ambulances. Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming put it plainly. The Biden Justice Department targeted him for keeping essential vehicles running in tough western weather. While Lake sat in prison, his wife Holly and a Cheyenne political consultant named Jeff Doherty launched a campaign to get him pardoned. They contacted every Wyoming lawmaker who would listen. Lummis wrote a letter directly to President Trump on September 30, 2025, asking for a pardon. She introduced a bill called the Diesel Truck Liberation Act in October to prevent future prosecutions. Lake was released early to home confinement in September 2025. He wore an ankle monitor. He expected to remain a convicted felon for life. On November 7, 2025, Senator Lummis called Troy Lake at home. The president had signed a full and unconditional pardon. Lake wept. He told reporters afterward, "I don't guess men are supposed to do that." Only about 45,000 people have received an unconditional presidential pardon since George Washington. Troy Lake, a diesel mechanic from Cheyenne, is one of them. The DOJ reversal. 2 months later, on January 21, 2026, the Department of Justice did something extraordinary. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche issued an internal memo directing federal prosecutors across the country to drop all pending criminal cases related to diesel emissions tampering. No new prosecutions, no more prison sentences. The DOJ Environment and Natural Resources Division posted it publicly. The official reasoning: sound enforcement principles, efficient resource allocation, and avoiding over-criminalization. Read that last word again. Over-criminalization. The Department of Justice just admitted that it was criminalizing behavior that should not have been criminal. The same department that put Troy Lake in a cell for 7 months, the same department that fined him $52,000, the same department that made a 65-year-old man spend his birthday and his wedding anniversary behind bars for fixing trucks. Troy Lake heard the news and told Cowboy State Daily, "Sounds like they're admitting that they did wrong, I guess." In February 2026, Senator Lummis invited Lake to the State of the Union address as her guest. 1 year earlier, he was on his second week in federal prison. Now he was sitting in the United States Capitol watching the president speak. The lie everyone believes. Here is where this story takes a turn that half the diesel community does not want to hear. The DOJ dropped criminal prosecution. Forums exploded. Facebook groups lit up. The message everywhere was the same. Deletes are legal now. Go for it. The government backed down. That is wrong. Dangerously wrong. And if you act on it without understanding what actually changed, you could still lose your truck, your shop, and tens of thousands of dollars. The Clean Air Act has not changed. Not one word. Removing, tampering with, or bypassing any emissions control device on a vehicle operated on public roads is still a violation of federal law. What changed is that the DOJ will no longer send you to prison for it. Criminal prosecution is off the table. But the EPA still exists, and the EPA operates its own civil enforcement program that has nothing to do with the DOJ's decision. Civil enforcement means fines. The EPA can investigate you, your shop, and your customers. They can impose penalties that start at $5,000 per vehicle per violation and scale up from there. No jury, no criminal trial, administrative enforcement. And then there are the states. California, Colorado, New York, and Minnesota all run their own emissions enforcement programs that operate completely independently of federal policy. The DOJ memo does not apply to them. If you are in California and you delete a diesel truck, the state can still come after you with its own penalties under its own laws. Nobody talks about this part. The forums don't mention it. The Facebook groups skip over it. The guys selling delete kits online are not putting disclaimers on their product pages. The DOJ did not legalize deletes. They decriminalized them at the federal level. That is not the same thing. And the difference between those two words could cost you $50,000. The verdict. The Diesel Truck Liberation Act is still working through Congress. If it passes, it would actually change the law, not just enforcement discretion, but the statute itself. Senator Lummis is pushing for it. Troy Lake, now free, is campaigning alongside her. But until that bill passes, the legal landscape is exactly what the EPA wants it to be. You will not go to prison, but you are not protected. The EPA estimated that over 500,000 diesel pickup trucks had their emission systems removed between 2009 and 2020. 500,000 trucks. The agency called it the single largest increase in air pollution from the motor vehicle sector in the United States. That number is the justification they will use to keep civil enforcement alive. even if criminal prosecution is gone forever. Troy Lake spent 7 months in a federal prison for doing the same thing tens of thousands of diesel mechanics have done for 2 decades. The government called him a criminal, then pardoned him, then admitted the prosecution was wrong, then refused to change the law that made it possible. And somewhere in Wyoming right now, another mechanic is looking at a school bus with a clogged DPF and a repair estimate that costs more than the bus is worth. And he's asking himself the same question Troy Lake asked: do I fix it and risk everything? Or do I let it sit? The EPA has an answer. Troy Lake has a different one. The law has not decided which one is right.